If you were going to turn one U.S. women's national team player into a Muppet, who is most Muppetable?
Oh, Lavelle feels pretty Muppetable.
I think Lavelle's a great candidate for
Yeah.
Muppetable. I think Crystal Dunn's also pretty Muppetable.
Crystal Dunn plays bass in Dr. Teeth's band.
Yeah, exactly.
Roosevelt's like a mixture of like Scooter and Gonzo.
Yeah, Mal Swanson has a bit of the gonzo about her, too. And goalkeepers are natural Muppets. Alyssa Nair would make a great Muppet because she's Sam the Eagle.
They're flipping. Yes, she's absolutely Sam the Eagle.
Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. The Olympics are here. The Olympics are here edition. I'm your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Wow. First of all, if you are not a member of our Patreon yet, what are you doing? Because for the low, low price of $6 a month, you could have been hanging out in our Discord from 11 a.m. Eastern to 5 p.m. Eastern, just yakking about these games and what games they were.
I've got to tell you, I was low productivity today, except for the fact that I was high productivity on our Discord.
On the things that really mattered.
Evan and I were talking about whether or not to name stamp what we said. And instead, I think we're playing the fun game of you don't know who's talking to you. The answer is we're both on there. And frankly, it's pretty distinct. It'll show up real quick.
If you're paying attention, you can sniff it out. But also the byproduct of being such good friends for 20 years and also like living in the same house for periods of time in our lives means that there are moments where even I'm typing something out and I'm like, did I say that?
I realized I couldn't like my own statements, and by that I mean your statements as you were typing them. I was you would just say something, you'd shut somebody down, and I was like, shit.
It hits different when you've slept in the same bed as somebody.
That's fair. That is fair. You know what was handsome? This result against Zambia. Or was it? 3-0. Seems like people are not as enthusiastic as they should be.
Okay, so 2 weeks ago, people are clutching their pearls about the fact that the U.S. can't score goals. Now, people are clutching their pearls about the fact that the U.S. isn't scoring enough goals, and I just don't know how to make you happy. I really don't. This 3-0 result was very definitive, in my opinion, and before you chime in on the whole goal difference thing, I want to remind folks that if the U.S. finishes in second place, that means they're probably going to play Colombia or Canada instead of Brazil or Japan. Just relax. Everything's fine right now. Plus, this game threw us a curveball in the 30th minute that totally changed its complexion. So, 3-0 scoreline feels pretty good to me.
The sort of unlucky finishing continues, but it's unlucky finishing. It's not bad chance creation. If you look at that shot map that the U.S. generated today, again, they put up 5 non-penalty XG, 0.185 non-penalty XG per shot, which is tremendous.
Excellent.
That's elite. That is exactly what you want. 25 shots in the box, 58 touches in the box. This is exactly what you are looking for. It just so happened that Zambian defenders, each of them deserve like a sponsorship from Icy Hot, the number of shots they took.
Yeah, they're throwing bodies in front of balls and managing to avoid touching them with their arms. It was a lot of desperation, last-ditch defending, and a lot of really, I'm sorry to say, very shambolic defending when they did not manage to get their body in front of the ball. This was a pretty definitive performance. I mean, like, again, just run down the stats. Like, compare it. 58 touches in the box. Zambia had 11.
And that's with Barbra Banda. That's with a Barbra Banda.
25 shots in the box to Zambia's 4. Field tilt is a stat that The Athletic developed, which basically just says, like, of all the passes that both teams completed in their respective attacking thirds, what percentage of all of those passes did each team comprise? And the U.S. completed 86% of all the passes in the attacking third in this game. That's another sign of pretty significant dominance. It took Zambia 32 passes in the middle and attacking thirds before they could get their foot on the ball to try and win it back. That's disastrous from a pressing point of view. This is wild. Of those 4 shots in the box from Zambia, Banda and Kundananji combined for only 3 of them. Banda only had 1 shot in the box the whole game. Grace Chanda and Prissa Chalufya, who were supposed to be the progression tools to try and get the ball to those forwards, they did not touch the ball in the final third once. And granted, they got pulled early because of the red card, so they did not actually even complete the first half. But the fact that you were on the field for, 35, 40 minutes, and you didn't get the ball in the attacking third one time speaks to the level of defensive dominance that the U.S. put in. And though there were a couple of times where Banda and Kundananji got into some space and they were able to run, it was not like when Orlando plays, say, Houston. That's not what this was.
Or Utah, who they lit up 6 goals.
Yeah.
I think the thing that comes into clearer view when you think about the performances of Kundananji and of Banda is that even the best players in the world need support and need people to play around. Ultimately, this game and the way in which Zambia is set up in general essentially says you have to do it all for us. You have to figure it out. We just don't have the caliber or quality. Soccer is not a sport where you can just give it to one person and make it work.
By the way that Australia played against Germany today, I think that Zambia's game plan could potentially work against a team like Australia because Zambia had to roll the dice and say, we're going to have to try and be a little bit more front foot than is necessarily comfortable because we lose 1-0, we lose 6-0, what's the difference? So let's go out and try and actually score. So they put a much more attack-minded midfield out on pitch. And what happened was the latter, which is, if not 6-0, certainly the performance would indicate a scoreline of that level because they could not stay organized. They theoretically would be dropping into a low block as the U.S. tried to build out, but there was no sense of communication, no sense of cohesion that would allow for a low block to be effective. Defenders and midfielders scattered all over the place. Like, you look at their passing network, which is basically the average shape, average formation when they're in possession. There's just this massive gap of space between the midfield and the defensive lines, which the moment the U.S. can win a turnover means that they've got places to run into. And man, oh man, it was just dire from the Zambian defense in that first half hour when they were playing at full strength.
It was a matter of when in that first half hour, and then an increasingly ratcheted up feeling of tension until the U.S. broke open the game. Now, I think that the U.S. going forward, there are enough things that happened both on and off the pitch today that I think are concerning or put in a short tournament. This isn't exactly the most comfortable outcome here, but we saw, as far as the game is concerned, as far as the game that we witnessed is concerned, we saw a very dominant U.S. performance, a red card that came after the U.S. was up 3-0, Mallory Swanson recording the fastest brace in U.S. history, comically dominant attack at times.
Trinity Rodman stealing the Zambian center back's soul. Her little, you can't even call it a Cruyff turn, as she called it in the mix zone after the game. It's Trin and spin, baby.
Yeah, oh my God. Did she call it that?
Yeah, that goal was terrifying.
Yeah, and that goal's terrifying for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
First off, the Sophia Smith touch.
Oh, yeah.
That creates space for herself and shows you that breakaway speed. The ability to then pick out Lindsey Horan and to have already spread the field enough. Lindsey Horan then playing a ball, Swanson's decoy run, Rodman's reception, and then Rodman's, yes, that's right, soul thieving. Ooh, that's the kind of goal that you just sit up and you get real delighted by. That's the good stuff, and it sometimes has felt too few and far between in the last couple of years for the U.S., but boy, when it clicks, it's gold. Germany's third kind of gave some of those vibes, but that first goal was incredible.
And then Swanson doing what Swanson does. I mean, particularly to round the keeper, I believe for the first goal was just a little touch magic. You want to talk about what Sophia Smith offers you when she's not shooting the ball is receiving that through ball and holding up just long enough to give Swanson enough time to break into space, and then she can lay off the pass. And then Swanson just takes a couple of touches and puts 3 Zambian players on skates, including the keeper, for an easy finish. It's what this attack was supposed to do last year. It's what this attack is now doing. They're not going to get an easier game than this one, but if they've got this in their locker, they can really make a show of it in games to come. I think particularly Australia is now looking like a real soft fixture next week. It's just a very encouraging performance, I think, all around, in a good way for the U.S. to get their legs under them. The Zambia red card in the 30th minute, looked to me like a pretty clear dog-so situation, which if you don't know means the denial of an obvious goal-scoring opportunity where there's only one defender between the keeper and the player charging in on goal in and around the box, and then you go put in a cleat and generate what would normally be like a yellow card foul, but because of the circumstances, it gets upgraded to a straight red. Looked like a pretty clear dog-so to me. What'd you think?
I actually would have preferred, because it was so borderline, it be called a penalty on the sort of basketball continuation, because then we would have been denied the double whammy of a red card. And I actually think the penalty sort of was more just in that moment than the sending off. The sending off, that was a real shot to the heart of Zambia, and it kind of ruined the game. And while I do think it is, because of where the foul is made, I do think the red card is ultimately also a fine interpretation of that. I would like to see the sort of the continuation rule, or like if momentum is carrying you into the box, that be shown more leniency. The ball is already steps into the box at that point. Smith is right on the edge of it. The edge should count. And I think that leaves Zambia not scrambling down a center back moving forward in the tournament, and leaves us without the anguish of that. I generally think for nonviolent conduct on the pitch, referees owe it to us to keep the game 11-11 and find other ways around that, more than they owe us the game remaining in whatever game state it is. I would rather see penalties issued than red cards.
This is an example of where
some discretion might have...
Well, and it's also an example of where, like, IFAB's laws are pretty clear.
Yeah.
When you deny an obvious goal-scoring opportunity when you're the last defender in a scenario like that, it's a red card. So the conversation that needs to be opened up is whether or not IFAB needs to take a look at that.
I love red cards for dog-so, like I do, but I also think that in a situation where it is that borderline in the box, allow the continuation on, give the yellow card, stop the double whammy, like just say yellow card pen. I know that that's not conventionally what should happen. I know that what happened is what's supposed to happen in a following of the letter of the law. When it went to VAR, it was correctly changed.
I saw some people on Twitter saying like there was no clear and obvious error here, and that's not true. If you're considering the laws as written,
yeah, that's right.
It was a clear and obvious error that they didn't call the red card first.
No, but it was just sort of a heartbreaking moment, and more than a penalty, it killed Zambia in this game. And frankly, it kind of killed the game. The U.S. Essentially, Smith is taken off for what might be an injury, what might not be a very serious injury. But it allowed the U.S. to start rotating sooner and allowed the U.S. to really take their foot off the gas, which when you consider the danger of Banda and Kundananji and what they ultimately ended up both creating and giving up, isn't so much foot off the gas. And they played it exactly the way one should play up a player, but in a tournament like this. They didn't overextend themselves.
That's the big thing that I think people really need to remember if they feel frustrated about the lack of fireworks in the second half. And it was very clear that Emma Hayes had a game plan, because in the 65th minute, Jenna Neiswanger comes on and basically plays as another midfielder. Corbin Albert came on in the second half. Casey Kruger came in. Crystal Dunn swung over to the right wing.
Both of them could have had goals.
They didn't park the bus, because that's not what you do against Zambia when you're up 3-0. But it was clear that patience, control, and making sure everybody stayed fresh was at the top of Hayes' mind. And again, if the U.S. comes in second in this group, and if it comes down to goal difference where they come in second in this group, that likely makes them play Canada or Colombia in the quarterfinal, because that's the likely runner-up in Group A. Whereas if they win the group, they're going to have to play the runner-up of Group C, and that's probably going to be Brazil or Japan. The pathway, if you are in second place, is not any more daunting than the pathway if you win the group. When you're trying to weigh risk-reward and saving players' legs when you know you've got a game in 72 hours, in another city, I might add, they're moving from Nice to Marseille, it might be better to increase the risk of finishing in second place than go for the reward of getting 4, 5, 6 goals by keeping your most attacking players who were on the field from minute one on the field.
This just felt so much more fluid than last summer's 3-0 opening against Vietnam. This just felt like a team that has better interplay, better talent, frankly, against better opposition. I don't know. I would you have wanted more goals piled on? Yeah, if this game had ended the way the XG suggests it should have at 5-0, I think we'd all feel a little bit better. But I'll take what happened on paper and be fine with it.
When you're generating 5 XG worth of chances, fine. And like Emma Hayes said after the Costa Rica game, that's the hard part, is being able to generate those kinds of chances. The finishing pixie will run out of steam at some point.
Who are your players of the game for?
Well, Gurma for one.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
We knew how much Hayes was thinking about the risks that Banda and Kundananji posed. Gurma is your best central defender. She is one of the best central defenders in the world. Therefore, it is an obvious choice to use her to mark Banda and be responsible for Banda, which she was for basically the whole game. There were some key moments that you might even not clock as like good moments. I think it was like the 13th minute and the 21st minute were a couple of points where Banda did manage to receive the ball in open space, and Gurma never really played touch tight, which is actually what Banda wants you to do. She wants you to get touch tight so she can turn and use the balance that she has to put you on the deck, and then there's nobody in front of her. So Gurma plays a couple of steps off and never lets Banda use her speed to bait her and get her turned around. So there's a moment in the 13th minute where Banda's charging forward, and Gurma, without ever getting her foot on the ball, and without ever actually getting really close to challenge Banda for a duel, manages to use her positioning to shepherd Banda further to the right, where Tierna Davidson is waiting. Because of Davidson's positioning, Banda doesn't have an angle. And so I can't remember if it's a shot or if she just has to lay off a pass, but it comes to nothing. There were multiple moments like that, again, in the 21st minute, a couple of times in the second half. Whenever it seemed like Banda was dangerous, Davidson and Gurma in particular, maintained their level of discipline that Banda never got a good look at net, ever.
She used her positioning to make sure that Banda's athleticism never got the best of her. That's all you're asking for out of a defender, which is like the deep self-knowledge to understand the distance in which you can and cannot allow a defender, like the attacker, to be away from you. And that's circumstantial. And I feel like Gurma, who made 4 tackles, including 1 last man tackle, really never... I mean, you're always going to be walking the tightrope with Barbra Banda. And Gurma did walk the tightrope. There's a moment, and I mentioned it on the Discord, in like the 65th minute where she sort of makes this sliding tackle, and as she's standing up, she sort of exhales like, whew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm doing my job, but oh boy, this Barbra Banda's no joke.
Yeah, I'm sure that she and Davidson went into the locker room at final whistle and just like collapsed on the locker room floor, being like, God, well, thank God we survived that. But the point is, they did survive it, and it wasn't by luck or by happenstance.
No.
They had a game plan. You can see it in the passing network. That rest defense structure maintained its shape, stayed in place, was willing to cede wide territory to make sure that actually dangerous areas were never available to Banda and Kundananji.
The other person, because I do think Davidson had a really nice game as well, worth noting, and defenders passing is always better, but Gurma was 79 for 82 on passes, including a key pass, 96%.
Which is the highest passing percentage since, 2012 in the women's tournament?
And again, not all those passes have to be more than functional, but Gurma showed a range of passing. Yeah,
steady
was
and
so
tidy.
Steady. And Davidson did a nice job complementing, had an easier assignment than Gurma did. No one had a harder assignment than Gurma did. Frankly, I'm not sure anybody will have a harder assignment than Gurma does in this tournament, unless they also have to match up Barbra Banda. That said, I thought that they were both very good, and I thought that Sam Coffey did just a hell of a job in the 6.
Coffey was great.
In a game that is actually really hard in the 6 because you need to be an additional number in attack while not losing defensive solidity, I felt really played her position immaculately. For me, the thing that really stands out about what she did is she connected on 6 of 7 long balls. She was just pinging them, and she had a 91% pass completion percentage.
Which is really remarkable for a midfielder.
Yeah, she was just having herself a game. And in this tournament, if what we get are the performances of Gurma, Davidson, and Coffey in that sort of like central defensive triangle, this team is going to be very difficult to break down and score.
Yeah, and again, they had more time on the ball than Germany is going to give them. They had the latitude to misplace a pass here and there because Zambia didn't have the organization or the athleticism to make them pay for it. Regardless, they did their job against, again, as Hayes put it, the most informed striker in the world. And listen to this. SofaScore, which is a great website that gives you tons of really good live in-game data, including player heat maps based on their touches. Their momentum chart really gives you a sense of the flow of the game and who's in control of when. They tell you how often a player like loses possession when they have it, which is like an incomplete pass or a dispossession, losing a tackle. So I like to divide the number of touches by that number of losses of possession just to see how good you are at like keeping the ball and keeping control. Coffey was a 9-to-1 ratio, 9 touches per loss of possession. Very good. Very, very good for a defensive midfielder. Tierna Davidson, 11.5 touches per dispossession. Very, very good for a center back. You want to know what Naomi Gurma's ratio was?
I am going to guess it's very good.
18.2. She touched the ball 91 times. She lost it 5 times.
Yeah, that's great.
All game.
That's great. No notes.
No notes.
No notes, Naomi. Yeah, I think that there's a lot to sort of take here and be excited about. That said, not a ton more to extract from this game. The U.S. beat the opponent in front of them. That opponent is the weakest team in the group. They have a nice 3 points to go in against a German team who looked pretty good against Australia. And that game on Sunday will be nowhere near this open. It'll be a completely different challenge. And I think it's actually worth now transitioning to talking about the implications of both Jaden Shaw's injury and Sophia Smith's injury, as at least the rest of the group stage matters. How are you feeling?
If Shaw cannot go for Germany or the rest of the group stage or potentially for the whole tournament, that takes the depth of the attacking midfield area in the U.S. lineup from arguably the deepest in this field to one of the thinnest. Because Macario's gone, Lavelle seems to be fine, but you never know. Shaw potentially is gone, and she just does not seem to want to get Croy Bethune into a game. I am concerned that Shaw will not be a bench option because you're going to need, especially against Germany, against these knockout opponents, you are going to need a plan B for how you connect the ball to the forward line, if not just through long passing. And Shaw is going to be really, really critical to that. Germany's performance, a couple of goals on set pieces. Obviously, that third goal was pretty special. I don't know how super convinced I am. I mean, I think that the game for them against the U.S. is winnable on Sunday, but it wasn't like they blew me away, at least on the offensive end against Australia. What did you think? And to say they were good. I mean, it's 2.2 to 0.3 xG.
In a lot of ways, national stereotypes lived to form again, which is to say a big, tall, blonde person won a header, and then they shut the game down. Germany was opportunistic. Their set pieces do look devastating. They have marked size advantage, and when they controlled the game, they really controlled the game. Australia, again, a beleaguered Australia, looked well off the German pace.
Very naive, I thought, in that performance.
I had future visions of Mackenzie Arnold picking the ball out of the net off set pieces for the Portland Thorns. I was like, oh, good, she's getting used to a shaky-ish defense. That's great. She'll be ready. That said, I felt like Australia really struggled. I'm not surprised they really struggled, but really never got a toehold in that game. Yeah. Certainly not after the first German goal. And from there, I felt the Germans, in a lot of ways, it's a lot of what we've said about this performance, although less dominant. Germany sort of was able to pace themselves out and play in control of the game and get their subs on.
I don't know if I've ever seen a more classic 4-4-2 passing network than what they offered. It really is just two bands of four and two strikers evenly spread out from each other. Those wingers are doing what we expected them to do. Pop seems like she is ready to go, and that she and Sheila are going to form that pairing up top.
I mean, Germa is an elite defender. There is height to be found there in the side as far as set pieces are concerned. Pop is going to be a problem. It's so much more for me about denial of service to the wings and making sure that that space is closed. And that's going to be a lot about tracking back both from Mal Swanson and Trinity Rodman. That's going to be about shifting and help defense. I hate to say it, but it wouldn't surprise me if Corbin Albert gets a start against Germany. I don't think that that's right, but I think given what we think about Emma Hayes...
God, it's going to be such a terrible watch if that's the case.
No, but everything we know about Emma Hayes suggests that for all the stuff that we've said about what we think, and Corbin Albert was thoroughly meh today, neither unacceptably bad nor any sort of a difference maker. That said, in a game where I think Emma Hayes' primary concern is going to be about shutting down distribution to the flank and closing down the midfield, I find it very easy to imagine her playing Haran in the 10, Albert in the 8, and Coffey in the 6, particularly given...
Yeah.
I think it's almost an inevitability, and I'm saying it to get people mentally prepared for that.
Yeah, just make it a mud fight. I mean, the player that Urs Rubesch played at number 6 ended up being... it ended up being Pop for a lot of the game, you know? She was stuck in so deep, and then her partner at number 8, ostensibly, was Janina Minga, who is a center back. So if it's them and Sjoeke Nuskin or Sydney Lohman, who Lohman's got a little bit more general attacking instincts than Nuskin does, if it's that kind of setup, and then you go with Albert, Haran, Coffey, that's a mud fight, man.
Yeah.
That's an absolute mud fight.
I think that what we know about, particularly with Emma Hayes, and rightfully so, feeling quite confident in the attackers she has, I think that she'll feel like 3 or 4 attackers are enough to win this game.
And just be willing to go over the shape rather than through the shape.
Yeah. I think that there is a very ugly game ahead of us. Not to say it won't be interesting, but a very ugly game ahead of us between these two teams.
Do you think Neiswanger starts?
No.
I don't think she does either.
Neiswanger, if you look at that map, Neiswanger always is... We were talking about it a little bit. The U.S. actually has though they use them differently, the sort of asymmetry that Spain has. Neiswanger playing the Carmona sort of perma attack down the left flank, and Fox the Onabat, though the similarities sort of end there. But in the same sort of more reserved, more defensive.
Yeah.
And it's because of the asymmetry of what the players on the field do. That said, I suspect we will see Crystal Dunn or Casey Kruger. I think I'd prefer it be Kruger.
Yeah, I would like to see Kruger and Fox line up. You can task them with saying, do not be put on an island, stay home, communicate with your midfielders to make sure that somebody is always defending that wide channel in your own half, and make sure that Linder, Huynh, Buell, and Brand cannot advance.
I'm going to pitch you something because obviously I don't have any sense of what Emma Hayes is actually thinking. But if I were Emma Hayes in this moment, what I would be humoring, I mean, if I were Emma Hayes and properly looking at what Corbin Albert actually is as a player, here's what I would be thinking. I'm going Kruger at left back. Obviously, our center backs are remaining the same. Fox is remaining. And then I'm going in the midfield, Coffey and Haran. And I'm moving Swanson to a center striker spot. And I'm actually putting Crystal Dunn on that other left flank. And then we have Rodman. If I'm trying to make a mud fight out of this game, I think I'm layering the field like that.
Don't hate it.
I don't love it either. I don't think it's going to be a pretty watch. You want to give a little score prediction for that one?
After today's performance, knowing what will lay in wait from Germany, I think it's going to be a 1-0 to Germany on like a set-piece header.
I have no issue with that. I think it's probably looking at 0-0, 1-1, 1-0. I don't know which way it'll break. I could see the U.S. getting it 1-0 on a well-placed counter, like a transitional goal. I don't see them particularly even committing much to breaking down this team.
That's all she wrote. Listen, guys, you're listening to us on the main feed. Very happy that you're joining us, especially if you're new to the show. But if you have not signed up for our Patreon, we would love for you to join us as one of our founding Deep Lying Playmaker members. For only $6 a month, you're going to get all of our bonus episodes as well as access to our Discord, where we're hanging out and chatting, sharing data and graphics and visualizations and all kinds of fun stuff during every single game of the Olympics. And you will also be getting an invitation to our live watch-along, which will be for Germany versus USA on Sunday. So that's going to be a members-only event. We would love to have you stop by. You will get access to that if you become a $6 a month member. You just got to go to patreon.com/xowngoals. That's the letter XOwnGoals. It's also on the profiles of all of our social media channels and our pinned posts, and we'll be tweeting about it a lot. But yes, patreon.com/the letter XOwnGoals. To join for only $6 a month. Until then, if you decide that that's not for you, then we will talk to you on Monday to recap the match between Germany and the USA.
No pressure. We love you anyway.
Bye.